Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to everywhere from the places you're listening and watching. I am actually not sure that this is the right time to start, but I do think it is. Um, there was a time change in America, and I checked the internet, so it should be all right. So, yes, today, as I mentioned in the announcement, we're going to talk about the Khandas. Yes, so it really seems to be the correct time. So, people coming on now. Good, great. Calculation is not really, yeah, easy for me. And great to see you all. And as I already said, today's topic are the Khandas. We're going to talk about the Khandas, and I was inspired of that because Ayya actually wanted or speaks when she has one of the mornings about the Therigatas. And one of those theories she's most probably speaking about is Patachara. Patachara was a bhikkhuni, and as a woman, she was a mother and she was a wife, and you will know her story from Ayya, I suppose. If not, let me know, then one day we can explore the story of Patachara, but I don't want to interfere with what Ayya is saying. So I feel very inspired by the Venerable Patachara theory of long ago. And she was one of the foremost bhikkhunis mentioned by the Buddha, and she had, I don't know, it is said, you never know how many that really were, but it is said she had at least 500 disciples who became arahant and arahantas. So one of them, another one, mentions her in her Therigatas and says that she taught her the five khandas, then the ayatanas, and then the dhatu. So that is the five aggregates. First, pancha khanda, salayatana, dhatuyu. Salayatana are the sense doors, and the dhatu is are the today I can't remember any English word, so please bear up with me. Dhatu are the elements, of course. So we talk about the khandas today, and I was always wondering why they always say like in that in those verses from the Therigatha or in some suttas, it is mentioned, I teach you, or I was taught the five khandas. So, and when you look at them, what is there to teach about? I was always thinking, well, what is there that they have taught? I mean, you know, it's body, it's feeling, it's sanya, perception, it's the volitional formation, sankhara, and it's vijnana. So of course you need it to learn it. When you hear the words in Pali, you need to learn what they mean in your language. But I always thought, what do they teach about it? And the Khandas are mentioned in so many suttas. There are in the Samyutta Nikaya, there is a Khandavaga. The five Khandas are mentioned in so many places, and we have another mention of them in the suttas when we call them the five Upadana Khanda, the five clinging aggregates, or the aggregates of clinging. So there is so much of it in the suttas that I thought, well, it can't then be so easy. There must be something to it. So I don't understand it. I don't see it. What is it? I can't say that I do see now. No, by far not. But I try to understand more about it. And so let's go slowly through it. What do we have? We have first mentioned also in some suttas, we are speaking about nama and rupa. Nama is the mind side where all the mental things are going on, and rupa is the physical aspect. So in rupa, we have rupa is forms, and then there is another word for forms, and that is kaya. The difference between those two is that rupa is a very, very analytic, say, word. It's like for any form, you can say rupa. For any form, mainly that is without a self. For any form that is without yeah, like this physical body is kaya, because there is something that I could comprehend as a self, whereas rup or rupa is something, any geometrical form can be a rupa. A table is a rupa without nama. There is no mental activity in it. And a kaya is more like a body that is living. My body, for example, with all its organs and all its thinking of it as self and all the mental activities, that would be a kaya. Whereas the mental activities are not a definition for kaya. But I think in English there are also different words for animate and inanimate forms. So that would also be the distinction here between nama and rupa. And in Thai, the monks, for example, are called rup, which derives from rupa and comes from a time when monks were all arahants. So without an inherent self, so they were just a form, and they knew they were just form. Then they were not kaya anymore, but understood as rupa. So that I find very interesting. When you have this nama rupa as a title for a working title, for example, then you can go further down and say, okay, nama has the four parts of the five khandas under itself. I'm not drawing now. I should to make it understood better, but rupa has kaya underneath itself, and kaya and rupa are both the elements. So we come to that link later. But there is in fact a link from nama to rupa, from rupa to kaya to the elements. When you sit down in meditation, you feel this body. So there is the link. And you can ask yourself, here, this kaya, this body, why do I know it? Why do I feel this is an I? Because you feel something. You feel yourself sitting. You feel an itch. You feel your breath. You feel another itch. You constantly feel something within this body. So why would you know about that feeling? Because you perceive it. There's the perception of those feelings and of those bodily formations. And then it continues. There are the sankharas, because there is an itch, and I perceived it. I perceived that bodily unpleasant feeling. Because there is an itch, I start thinking, I want to scratch myself. I don't want to have this itch. And then I start moving. So, next thing, of course, there is this sankhara, this formations, mental formations. And then the next thing in line, if you read it in the books, would be vijnana, the consciousness. So this body, those feelings, these perceptions, and the volitional formations that are coming in the end to your mind consciousness. There are different than in our Western philosophy or way of thinking, say, there are kind of different ways of putting the consciousness in Pali. We have one consciousness, and people are often talking about that one consciousness. And this in Pali is not exactly the same as we see it in the West. We have the sense doors, and we come to that in 2 weeks maybe. We have the sense doors, and with those sense doors comes a consciousness of the eyes. There can be seeing consciousness. There are other factors that need to come into place, like turning towards an object that you are about to see. But there is not that one big consciousness that we are always thinking of. That one consciousness that perceives all, or that knows all. That is not so in Pali. But there is one thing, because one of our senses is the mind, there is that mind consciousness, of course. And there we know things. There we understand things. There we become aware. There we perceive our mental formations or our volitional formations. So these are working very, very closely together, these 5 khandas, and they are what we perceive as I. Not a good thing to do, because then they are not only the khandas, the 5 khandas, but they have become, by clinging onto them, they have become the 5 upadana khanda, the 5 aggregates of clinging. And we become so used to cling to them, to think, oh, this is my body, oh, these are my feelings, oh, my ideas, my mental formations are so brilliant. And my consciousness is so connected and all these things that we can actually really think and believe. That we get very, very far away from the things as they really are and how we should see them. So I want to try to bring us a little bit closer to seeing them as what they are, just the 5 khandas. There is not so much to it. And I have brought to you a sutta, which is, I had several in mind, but I'm just reading out, I think, the very first of the Khandavagga, because this is actually, there is everything in it, and it's written out in the book. So that is the Samyutta Nikaya. And there it is, the 3rd part, the book of the aggregates, the Khandavagga. Number 22, the Khandha Samyutta. And there, the very first sutta, the Nakulapita Sutta. Thus have I heard on one occasion The Blessed One was dwelling among the Bhagas at Sumsumara Gira, at the Besakala Grove, the deer park. Then the householder Nakulapita approached the Blessed One, paid homage to him, sat down on one side, and said to him, I am old, venerable sir, aged, burdened with years, advanced in life, come to the last stage, afflicted in body, often ill. I rarely get to see the Blessed One and the bhikkhus worthy of esteem. Let the one, let the Blessed One exhort me, venerable sir. Let him let him instruct me, since that would lead to my welfare and happiness for a long time. So is it, householder, so is it. This body of yours is afflicted, weighted down, encumbered. If anyone carrying around this body were to claim to be healthy even for a moment, what is that due to other than foolishness? Therefore, householder, you should train yourself thus. Even though I am afflicted in body, my mind will be unaffected. My mind will be unafflicted. Thus, should you train yourself, then the householder, Nakulapita, having delighted and rejoiced in the Blessed One's statement, rose from his seat and, having paid homage to the Blessed One, keeping him on his right, he approached the Venerable Sariputta. Having paid homage to the Venerable Sariputta, he sat down to one side, and the Venerable Sariputta said then to him, Householder, your faculties are serene. Your facial complexion is pure and bright. Did you get to hear a Dhamma talk today in the presence of the Blessed One? Why not, venerable sir? Just now I was anointed by the Blessed One with the ambrosia of a Dhamma talk. What kind of ambrosia of a Dhamma talk did the Blessed One anointed you, householder? And then the very same thing is repeated. I continue where then the Nakula Pitta gets finished with his explanation of what the Buddha said. And he says, it was with the ambrosia of such a Dhamma talk, venerable sir, that the Blessed One anointed me. So, didn't it occur to you, householder, to question the Blessed One further as to how is one afflicted in body and afflicted in mind, and how is one afflicted in body but not afflicted in mind? We would come from afar, Venerable Sir, to learn the meaning of this statement from the Venerable Sariputta. It would be good indeed if the Venerable Sariputta could clear up the meaning of this statement. Then listen and attend closely, householder. I will speak. Yes, Venerable Sir. The householder Nakula Pitta replied. The Venerable Sariputta said this. How, householder, is one afflicted in body and afflicted in mind? Here, a householder, the uninstructed worldling, who is not a seer of the noble ones and is unskilled and undisciplined in their Dhamma, who is not a seer of superior persons and is unskilled and undisciplined in their Dhamma, regards form as self, or self as possessing form, or form as in self, or self as in form. He lives obsessed by the notion, I am form. Form is mine. As he lives obsessed by these notions, that form of his changes and alters. With a change and alteration of form, there arises in him sorrow, lamentation, pain, displeasure, and despair. He regards feeling as self, or self as possessing feeling, or feeling as in self, or self as in feeling. He lives obsessed by the notions I am feeling. Feeling is mine. As he lives obsessed by these notions, that feeling of his changes and alters. With a change and alteration of feeling, there arise in him sorrow, lamentation, pain, displeasure, and despair. He regards perception as self, or self as possessing perception, or perception as in self, or self as in perception. He lives obsessed by the notions I am perception. Perception is mine. As he lives obsessed by this notion, that perception of his changes and alters. With a change and alteration of perception, there arise in him sorrow, lamentation, pain, displeasure, and despair. He regards volitional formations as self, or self as possessing volitional formations, or volitional formations as in self, or self as in volitional formations. He lives obsessed by the notions I am volitional formations. Volitional formations are mine, and he lives obsessed by and as he lives obsessed by these notions, those volitional formations of his change and alter. With a change and alteration of volitional formations, there arise in him sorrow, lamentation, pain, displeasure, and despair. He regards consciousness as self, or self as possessing consciousness, or consciousness as in self, or self as in consciousness. He lives obsessed by the notion I am consciousness. That consciousness is mine. As he lives obsessed by these notions, that consciousness of his changes and alters. With change and alteration of consciousness, there arise in him sorrow, lamentation, pain, displeasure, and despair. It is in such a way, householder, that one is afflicted in body and afflicted in mind. And how, householder, is one afflicted in body but not afflicted in mind? Here, householder, the instructed, noble disciple, who is a seer of the noble ones and is skilled and disciplined in their Dhamma, who is a seer of superior persons and is skilled and disciplined in their Dhamma, does not regard form as self, or self as possessing form, or form as in self, or form as in self. He does not live obsessed by the notions I am form, or form is mine. As he lives unobsessed by these notions, that form of his changes and alters. With a change and alteration of form, there do not arise in him sorrow, lamentation, pain, displeasure, and despair. He does not regard feeling as self, or self as possessing feeling. of feeling as in self, or self as in feeling. He does not live obsessed by the notions, I am feeling, or feeling is mine. As he lives unobsessed with these notions, that feeling of his changes and alters. With a change and alteration of feeling, there do not arise in him sorrow, lamentation, pain, displeasure, and despair. He does not regard perception as self, or self as possessing perception, or or perception as in self, or self as in perception. He does not live obsessed with the notions, I am perception, perception is mine. As he lives unobsessed with these notions, that perception of his changes and alters. With a change and alteration of perception, there do not arise in him sorrow, lamentation, pain, displeasure, and despair. He does not regard volitional formations as self, or self as possessing volitional formations, or volitional formations as in self, or self as in volitional formations. He does not live obsessed by the notions, I am volitional formations. Volitional formations are mine. As he lives unobsessed by these notions, those volitional formations of his change and alter. With a change and alteration of volitional formations, there do not arise in him sorrow, lamentation, pain, displeasure, and despair. He does not regard consciousness as self, or self as possessing consciousness, or consciousness as in self, or self as in consciousness. He does not live obsessed by the notions, I am consciousness, consciousness is mine. As he lives unobsessed by these notions, that consciousness of his changes and alters. With a change and alteration of consciousness, there do not arise in him sorrow, lamentation, pain, displeasure, and despair. It is in such a way, householder, that one is afflicted in body, but not afflicted in mind. That is what the Venerable Sariputta said. Elated, the householder Nakulapita delighted in the Venerable Sariputta's statement. So, now back to the beginning of our little text. So, there, the householder already acknowledges that he is old and in pain, and I can relate to that. It's not only itching, but here it's hurting, there it's tearing. And when we get older, that is what is meant by changing and alteration of the form in this occasion here. And the Nakula Pita was, by the way, a very devoted lay practitioner and devotee of the Buddha. And so he was one who definitely had been visiting the noble ones and was listening to what they said. And he tries to understand, and I can relate so much that he received that one sentence from the Buddha and then was so delighted that he forget to ask, what do you mean by that? So was good that he had a chance to see the Venerable Sariputta. But here in the sentence of the Buddha, we have the separation, as I was mentioned, as I had mentioned it before, in nama and rupa. So one, where is it? Here. Even though I'm afflicted in body, my mind will be unafflicted. There we have a general distinguishment between the body and the mind. And one can be falling apart or getting ill, becoming sick, can be that you get old, as it is in nature with this body. And usually we feel it as an affliction. And the Buddha now says we don't have to. There is that saying that suffering is not mandatory, unavoidable. But to suffer is optional. And this is really like that. We can have physical afflictions, but we do not necessarily be afflicted mentally by those physical bodily afflictions. That is what the Buddha said to the Nakulapita, the father of Nakula. And with that, which is already such a profound and deep teaching, Nakulapita leaves the Buddha and goes to Sariputta. And Sariputta reminds him, you could have asked him. Well, he didn't, so he explains then the 5 khandas, just as we were speaking about it in the beginning. There is nama and rupa, and then if you want to explain further, if you want to explain in more detail, you go to the 5 khandas. And then later you can also go into further detail. Now, the problem, as I said also in the beginning, is that we make these khandas that are in itself just the khandas. There's just that body. There are just feelings. There's just perception. There are just mental formations. And there's just consciousness. But we think this is mine. We think I can do with it what I want. This belongs to me and I am the master of it. And then they become the upana panchupadana khanda. They then become the aggregates of clinging. And that is the problem that all uninstructed worldlings have, and even those who are listening to the Buddha and listening to the wise ones and listening to the teachers have to deal with this attachment to these 5 khandas for a long, long time. And that is why it is so important to really look very, very deeply into them and really to see that the body is just the body. It's a body. When I think this is my body, it's already over. I'm already going the wrong way of thinking. So we have this idea of making this I, me, mine. And this, to remember, this is not me. This is not mine. This is not myself. In regards to the body, in regards to the feelings, to the perceptions, to the volitional formations and the consciousness. This is very important for us to do. But there are so many traps that I can sit there and think, yeah, this body is not mine. I am not my body. And then it itches. It's itching now here. It itches. And then that itching bothers. And we don't want it. So then we already made it. My body is itching and I want to do something about it, instead of just observing itching as a physical appearance. I make it mine. My body is itching. And my feeling is averse to it. I don't want it. So I have to do something about it. I have to do something about it. This is so full of my, me, and I, and that happens so quickly. You know, it itches and whoop, there's not much cognition, no much knowing about that process that is actually going on so quickly between the itch and the movement. But that is so full of I, me, mine, and we don't see it, we don't understand it. We even think that, well, it's itching and then I scratch. Yeah, when I, then yes. But if I want to see it as it is, really, with wisdom, then the body is the body, the itch is the itch, and the thought of scratching is a different thing, and the scratching is another thing yet again. And all of these things that are coming in procedures, one thing, one after the other as a process, is just a very natural process with no I whatsoever involved. What I love about this sutta is how the Sariputta then explains that we are obsessed with the notions I am form and form is mine. It's not easy to see that it is not like that. That it is really a notion that is habitual, arisen due to conditions, due to things that we have learned. This I making, mind making, thinking there is a self involved in it, is habitual. We learn it from childhood on. I observed my nieces when they were babies and little children. There was not much sense of I or mine. When they were with the mother, they were totally with the mother, and there was kind of no distinction between them and the mother. When they were with me, there was no distinction between them and me. That was very, for me, very astonishing. And then with the years, they started to build up their sense of self. And from 4 years on, they started to ask, what do you like? I like this. And why do you like this better than that? And all these questions. So they built up their minds. They made up their minds. And we say it very correctly. We are making up our minds. It's just a making up of things. It's not real. My niece, if that was so, or anybody, I am not blaming my niece, I have to say, but when we decide I like yellow better than green, that is so out of the blue, if you want. There is no reason, or there might be a reason, but it's conditioned. And also, maybe your mother gave you a nice thing and wore a yellow dress. So you remember yellow as something nice, so that you like yellow and have yellow as your favorite color is totally conditioned. That has nothing to do with I or me or mine. And it does not define I, me, or mine. Not because I like yellow, I'm something different from if I would like green. So this is totally without any self. From beginning on, we make these things up. We make our minds up. I love that expression in English. We don't say it as clear as it is in German language. It's really beautiful. And we stick to that notion. Once we have made up our minds, we stick to that. And as Sariputta said, we are being obsessed then with it. And that may be form or whatever else with the feelings. Even more so, maybe. I don't know. Maybe not more so, but not less. That we think, oh, my feelings. You hurt my feelings. When there is a hurt, then there is an I. When the I is gone, the feeling is just the feeling. Then there might be a hurt, there might be a joy, there might be a moment of whatsoever feeling, and that moment comes, is there, and ceases. Especially perception and volitional formations. These are the things that we pester other people with, that we bother. You know, we perceive things, and it's just a perception. You remember that very famous story of that person who walks through the forest and sees a snake, and in fact, and perceives it as a snake, but in fact it was just a rope. And we all know these things, that we perceive something and it's totally different. It is completely otherwise. Perception is not mine. In meditation, for example, when people in meditation have been very strong religious Christians before they start to meditate, and they start to see lights and things, they start to see angels and Jesus rather than Buddha statues and devas, because of what they are used to see, what they are used to think. It is habitual, it is conditioned, what we perceive. If we learn about a person to be like this or like that, we do perceive that person like this and like that. You know, when you go to work, for example, you start a new job, and there are always people jumping in and telling, oh, this person is like this, that person is bad, oh, don't talk to them. This is a nice person, this is so and so. And that leaves something with you, an idea with you. And you will then perceive those people like you were told. So also this is conditioned. If you wouldn't have been told that these people are like this and like that, you most probably would perceive them otherwise. So the perception is so very tricky, and we shouldn't at all buy what it is telling us. We should be extra careful and not trust our perception, because it's always tainted by our defilements, by the kilesa. We see things, we perceive things through the lens of greed, hatred, and delusion. So it's very difficult for us to see things otherwise, to perceive things other or apart from our greed, hatred, and delusion. And of course, it's very, very important to struggle and to go through that struggle and go beyond and seeing the things really as they really are. And the perception, I would think, is the most difficult to transform. Because you remember last week we were talking about the drenches that we dug that are forming our habits, and that commonly we are following our habits then again. So perception is really, really following our habits. The volitional formations, I think this word is a little bit difficult, but what it means is our will. I want to do this and that, or I do not want, or as I gave in the example, I want to scratch. The idea of scratching, or the idea of giving a talk, or any idea wanting that is forming because of things that are going on. These are the sankharas. These are the volitional formations. Our will, the will to scratch, the will to go somewhere. And in the West, especially, we have that idea that we have a free will, but we're far away from it. There is no such thing as a free will. There are conditions, and when the conditions are in a way that things happen, then yes, we can go through with our ideas and with our will. But that there really is a free will? No. I can perceive that there is a free will when I perceive it itching. It's itching again now here. So I can perceive that I have the free will and can, because of that, scratch. But I do not have the free will to say, I'm not letting it itch. This is just happening. There's no way for me to say, no, my body from now on is not going to itch anymore. Or I will never ever have pain again, or my gray hair is turning black again, or I want to have long red fingernails for now. This is all not possible. So I can have a will, but there is no way. Because we think we have that free will. We are not giving into the Buddha's teaching so easy, and still believe, even after seeing, I can't let my hair grow. I can't make my skin less wrinkly, even seeing that. I can't become young again, even after seeing that. We have the will or the mental formations not to acknowledge it as it really is. We have the will to see away, to look away, and not to understand it. And this is a huge problem. If we start at least to acknowledge and to think in the direction, okay, there might be something to that what the Buddha says, and there is no such thing as a free will, for example, or I can't just do as I wish, then we would have gained a lot already. Well, times again is up, and I just want to say, of course, with the consciousness, It's all the same. We are not our consciousness. Consciousness is not ours. And there is no entity that is consciousness. There are conscious moments of seeing consciousness, hearing consciousness, smelling, tasting, touching, and cognizing consciousnesses. But even this is not a self, not I, me, mine. So maybe I can just very briefly mention the Sutta 22, number 55. This was the first one. But if you have a moment, you can also read Samyutta Nikaya 22, Sutta number 55, Inspired Utterance. This is such a beautiful sutta. I would have preferred to read this, but it is so abbreviated that it's difficult to read it from the book. And I didn't finish to read it out, to write it out, to read it to you. But there are some very, very important points that are made in the sutta. So I just want to refer you to that. And next time we are going to talk about the ayatana, salayatana. Okay, dears. I hope I was really correct with starting at 1 o'clock, but I think there was that time change in America, so that should have been all right. I wish you all the best. Blessings to you, blessings to the world. May there be peace.